Hey guys, so I don't know how it is where you are, but it is still very, very cold here. So excuse me while I am bundled in a bajillion layers, but I could not keep the cold outside from having me bring you a review that is not only on time, it is in fact possibly early. Crazy, I know. However, I just read this book. I read it in one sitting. I absolutely loved it because it was so interesting and so unique. But I also knew that it was the kind of book for a romance novel that I really needed to do a review of, because if you are expecting a more traditional romance novel, you may be disappointed. But I don't want people to miss this book or not know what to expect, because it was just so good and I can't wait to tell you about it. So the book that I am here to tell you about today is The Ex-perimento by Maria Murillo. And this book is the story of Maria, not to be confused with the author. Female character said he was also Maria. And kind of a couple of dudes. This story is Maria Murillo's debut novel. And honestly, this is the story of Maria, the main character. This is a very unique romance novel which opens you up on one of the best and yet worst times of Maria's life. Maria has been dating a man named Alejandro for the last 4 years, and she thinks that their life is set up to be perfect. The opening sequence is when Alejandro is graduating from university as a medical doctor, and she has stood by him while he's been through this. It's been so hard, and she is just like so ready for their real life to begin. She has their kids' names picked out, their dog's name picked out, where they're gonna live, all this stuff. And she's ready. Now, of course, because Maria is the perfect girlfriend, she has planned Alejandro's graduation party down to a T. And there is music, there's catering, and you immediately start to notice there are cracks in this relationship. Alejandro's mom clearly doesn't like Maria. She's picked the music, but he's kind of like, I don't really like this, it's too loud. But at the same time, at this party, Maria is off in a corner, kind of like by herself, and she witnesses Alejandro's mom give him a small box that is the perfect size for a ring. And so, of course, Maria is pushing all her doubts aside. She's like, okay, this is going to be great. He's going to propose. Everything is going to be fine. So after the party, Alejandro asks Maria out to have dinner with him at a nice place a few days later. And again, in the lead up to this moment, Maria's like, okay, it's going to happen. He's going to propose. But we're just seeing more and more cracks in this relationship. So Maria works for a magazine called Ella, and this is a lifestyle magazine for which she writes about relationships and gives relationships advice. And, she really, really loves her job, but Alejandro kind of like doesn't like it and thinks it's super cheesy and weird. And of course, Maria has more aspirations. She wants to write about culture and the arts, and she sees this job as a stepping stone to get there. But again, Alejandro, not really supportive of this whole thing. He suggests a restaurant for them to go to. She doesn't like the food there, and he's supposed to know that, so she suggests a different place. And this whole book is set in Caracas, Venezuela. And Caracas as a city is a place that Maria loves. She loves calling it home there. And it's also very clear that Alejandro does not like Caracas as a city and would rather live somewhere else. But again, she's like, this is fine. He's going to propose. It's going to be great. So at this dinner, she sets up her phone to surreptitiously record what she believes is going to be a proposal, but it's not. Alejandro says that they need a break, and as Ross and Rachel fans know, is there such a thing as a break? Is it a breakup? Alejandro definitely calls it a break, but Maria is just left reeling. She doesn't understand what's going on. She leaves the restaurant like in tears, is sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And that night, her boss at Ella texts her and is like, hey, you didn't post this video to our Instagram that you were meant to post. And through her tears, Maria's like, so sorry, I'll post it now. And as you can guess, she posts the wrong video. She accidentally broadcasts being broken up with or taking a break with on her job social media channel. And so this job also fires her. So suddenly Maria has no boyfriend, no job, her entire life has blown up, and she doesn't know what to do. In order to try to get her job back, Maria approaches the editor of her now former job and pitches the idea of what will eventually be called the Ex-perimento, which is a number of experiments in which she will try to get Alejandro to get back together with her. And her editor says, okay, if you can do this, then maybe you can have your job back. And so Maria's basically working on this piece on spec, still does not have a job. And so she's just applying and applying and applying while also trying to do some very awkward things to get Alejandro back, and eventually gets a job as a production assistant on a TV show in Venezuela that is very similar to like The Voice or something like that, in which there are some judges who are singers who are working with different groups and teams of people, and it's like a competition, a singing competition. Maria is paired as the production assistant to a guy named Simon. Simon is one of the lead singers of one of her favorite Venezuelan bands, and of course he's very attractive and makes Maria all tongue-tied. And as she's driving him around to and from the set, he accidentally ends up with her experiments list, which he takes it upon himself to edit, mostly saying, please God, don't do that. Because of course, Maria has some very over-the-top ideas about getting back together with Alejandro. And when Simon's, advice works better than the plans that Maria set up for herself, Maria asks Simon to help her with the experiments and get Alejandro back. Now, of course, this will not go the way that Maria expects, because Simon is the actual love interest of this book. Now, if that description felt very long-winded and you thought it took me a long time to actually name the male romance interest in this book, you are correct. This is what I mean. This is a romance novel that is the story of Maria. It is a single POV, and you know that a lot of times I am really, really crabby about that. But for this book in particular, that really works, because this is Maria's story of learning to love herself. And that is really, I think, the main focus of this book, that like Alejandro and Simon are kind of just like circling around. Maria is one of those people who has basically dictated her identity by her job, by her boyfriend, but then come to find out that when Alejandro asks for a break, he says things like, you're really controlling, you pick our entire lives. Essentially, he's like being like, you made all the decisions, and like that was fine while I was in med school, but like now I'm by myself and now I'm like out of school and I want to learn how to do this by myself. And she's just flabbergasted because she's just like, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. You never said anything. And so she's like all of the sudden coming to this realization that the picture perfect life she thought they were planning, they were only her plans apparently. Because she was girlfriending too good, I guess. However, because Maria is just like, I need to try really hard, I need to show him that I can be spontaneous and interesting. Like all of her experiments are like, make his mom like me and like remind him that he loves me by sending him a bunch of flowers. And then Simon eventually wanders into the situation and he's like, no, you need to like be apart from him. He asked for space, give it to him, but like show him that you can have a blast without him, that type of a thing. And so again, yes, Maria is becoming closer to Simon through having a blast without Alejandro, but really it's like, oh, I've had my hair long for a really long time because that's the way Alejandro liked it. But like, actually, I like my hair short, and like different things that she's like kind of coming back to her own self and her own individuality and personality, because Alejandro may have called her controlling, but there was a lot of things he demanded she do that she's now realizing, oh my God, I actually didn't like that. My main issue with this book is the beginning of the setup, basically, which is that I knew when it started that it would be a fresh breakup between Maria and Alejandro, but I was supposed to be rooting for Maria and Simon. And I have issues with books that have this type of setup because a lot of time I just kind of feel like bad or icky about the situation because, you know, Maria is like clearly not over Alejandro, but like I said, I'm supposed to be shipping her with Simon. And what I really appreciated about this book is that it leaned into that. And rather than making it weird or maybe icky, it was like Maria is really stuck up in her own head. She's really, really focused on Alejandro. And like, yes, she sees Simon as attractive, but also she's just like really, really focused on her goal, which is getting this like perfect life back. And to the point where in the beginning is kind of hard to read because you just want to shake her. You want to shake her loose of like her obsession with this guy who like clearly is not right for her, but she's like so desperate to get him back. And you kind of have to travel on that journey with her of like, oh, I just thought this was what I wanted and I was trying so hard to make it be what I wanted. And now I have the freedom to actually explore what I actually want and maybe even what I actually need, and that being different than what she thought she wanted. Simon is also involved in this story with his eyes fully open. He goes into this knowing that Maria is still hung up on Alejandro, who he very clearly thinks is a dick. But he likes Maria, and so he's kind of willing to go along with that. And what I really like is as their relationship progresses, this is the definition of a slow burn. This is also technically a closed door romance, but I'm going to be honest with you, and this is what I said, if you're expecting a traditional romance novel, you're not going to get it. I'm pretty sure during the main events of this novel, they do not sleep together. Like, they kiss twice. Because like I said, Simon's there with his eyes open and he's telling her like, I really like you and I think that you like me, but like, I am not going to get into something when you're not in that same place or space with us to really work on making this real. Like, he's like, I don't want to be a fling. I don't want to be your rebound. And so he's really good at setting his personal boundaries with her. Like, you know, when they start to kind of migrate that a ways rather than her like towards Alejandro, towards Simon, which I just really liked. And it just made me really fall in love with the story that was being presented, Maria's story, rather than being like, ugh, in order to make this a romance novel, they're forcing people together faster than they like healthily should be. And I just loved it. There's also this whole thing that I haven't even touched with Maria and her mom. Her mom is an actress and dragged Maria around for a lot of her life, you know, which created a sense of instability, which is why Maria was like so interested in that sense of security and safety that she got from Alejandro, even when, you know, it was kind of dragging on her a little bit. They have a relationship to work on for themselves as well, which, as you know, I really love in my romance novels when there's just more than one thing going on. And again, as long as you are fine with this being a story about Maria and Maria thinking she loves Alejandro, not loving herself, realizing that she can love herself and maybe also has feelings for Simon and maybe can fix this relationship with her mom. Like, it is a really, really wonderful story about love in so many different ways. But again, it is not set up to be that traditional like romance story where the love interest, Maria's love interest in this case being Simon, factors in really strongly. He is kind of there to support her on her journey, and then also to say, you are still on this journey and I need you to respect like my boundaries about it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. If you're not prepared for it and you wanted like a hot and steamy fast burn romance novel, you may not love it. And that's why reviews are important. So like I said, this is this author, Maria. This is her debut novel, and it is a novel that just made me really excited to read more from her. I loved how unique it was. I loved the setting in Caracas, Venezuela, not armchair travel, two people who live there and in terms of Alejandro and Maria. Simon is actually Colombian. There is Spanish mixed in throughout. It just felt really fresh and interesting. And then of course it has this like different plot as well that again is really built on personal growth and love in all these different ways, and not necessarily just forcing two people to kiss, when I'm just like, work on yourselves more. Like, this is a relationship when we get to the end that I'm like, yes, you have done the work and now you're gonna have your happily ever after. And I'm so happy that both of you are living your best lives. So in that sense, it is everything that I want in a romance novel, which is just like affirming and lovely and gives me all these happy feelings. So I cannot recommend it enough. Like I said, this review is early. This book comes out next week, so thank you to the publisher and Edelweiss for my free advanced review copy. But put it on a list, put it on hold if you can at your local library or your local bookstore, however it is that you get your books, because if this type of plot line sounds like where you are at right now, this is really well done, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Again, I know this is a little early, but I could not wait another second to tell you about this. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me while I rambled, and I'll see you next time. Bye.